Okay, this is the program that we had written in the last session. Let's say we have received a enhancement request from the college saying कि marks of the student for maths and science to be included. So marks will be for a test. So test is a concept that we have to incorporate in our program. So we create a class called test, which will have two data members, subject name and the marks, constructor of test, and I have a function called accept test marks. In this, enter the subject, enter the marks, and I have display marks details. Okay, that is as far as the test class is concerned. The student class already was there, we had done it, but now we are adding a data member. Right, till now whatever data members we had incorporated in our classes were primarily of int, char, float, that kind of thing, basically inbuilt data types. Now what we are doing is it's a user defined data type. So user defined means what? It's a class. So class test we have created previously above. So now we are saying ki I am going to have an array of objects named T of type test, right? So we are adding a data member. Then this was already there, but at the end of the constructor call to student, what I am also doing is ti dot accept test marks. Now remember it's an array of two tests. So I am setting up a loop and each time it calls the accept test marks. Okay. Then I have display resident details. This is a common function for both resident and non-resident. The details that will be displayed when this function is called will be different in both the cases. And I have made it as virtual. These is something new that I have included. So virtual basically means that the display resident details is not complete in this class. So the method for this, the implementation, has to be provided in the subclass. Okay. Now then I have void display student. This was already there previously also, but now what I have done is that after displaying roll number, name, parent name, address, telephone, which is common to both types, I am calling display resident details. Now think carefully. In the parent I am calling display resident details within display student. The prototype I have provided here, but I have made it as virtual. That means it doesn't know what to display. So this will be taken care of by the resident student and non-resident student. So those two classes will have to provide the implementation. So at runtime what will happen? When this function gets called, the implementation provided in the subclasses will be executed. Once that is executed, then it will come back to the next statement. So for int I is equal to 2, display marks details. Okay. Then I have class resident student, public student. Okay, this was already there, all this was already there, right? Another change that I have made is that I have commented out these two lines. Now instead of subclass calling a parents operation, we have a parents operation calling the child's implementation. So display resident details is being called by a function which is defined in the parent. Okay, so then it will display the hostel number, room fees. Similarly, non-resident student, same changes. I have commented out these two. Instead of the non-resident student calling the display student of the parent, it is a parent's function that is going to call the child's display resident details. Okay. And then it will display the guardian name, address and telephone. Then we have the main. Now, clear screen. There is no change in the main at all. Right? There is no change. Everything is as it was. So now let's see, how it works. See, if I enter R for resident student, RS object gets created of type resident student. So the moment I do this, the moment this gets executed, what happens? Very critically, what happens is that when I call the constructor of the child, first the constructor of the parent is called, right? Got it? And even before this, these data members get initialized, right? So what happens? Roll number, student name, name, address, telephone, all these get initialized in the memory. And then remember, an array also gets created in the memory. An array of 2 named T, which is of type test. So basically 2 test objects get created. So which means that the constructor of this gets called, and here these 2 data members get initialized, and then the constructor, in the constructor they are initialized to null and 0, and then the constructor of the student gets called, right? So here what happens? It will ask us for the roll number, student name, name, address, telephone. Then within this loop, it will call the except test marks. Once this is over, then the child's constructor gets executed. So here now we enter the hostel number, his hostel fees, and the hostel room number. Okay. So that completes the entire sequence of creation of the objects because of this one single statement. Then of course, using that RS, I say rs.displayStudent. Now this display student, we are doing it for whom? Let's say I have pressed R. So R is resident. So in a resident student, it will execute display student. But display student, is it there? No, it's not there. There are only 2 functions. One is the constructor and one is the display resident details. So the parent's display student gets executed, right? So as part of this, roll number, name, parent name, address, telephone gets displayed. Then this function gets called. But this function has not been implemented in student class. It has been implemented in resident student. So display resident details gets executed. And here I have commented out these 2. So now hostel number, room, fees gets displayed. Then the control goes back to the display student of the parent. Here it goes to the next statement, and in the next statement we have a loop in which it calls the display marks details of T1 and T2. That is, the test marks gets displayed. Once this has been displayed, then the entire sequence of display student is completed. Same thing happens with respect to the non-resident student, right? Now, why did I do this? Why did I in student, why did I do this virtual? So that I make sure that, in projects, I'm sure you have experienced this, that projects are done by not one person, it's generally done by group of people. So I might write the student class, somebody else may write the non-resident student class, somebody else may write a resident student class. Now, since I am writing the student class, I want to make sure that those 2 people provide the implementation for this. They define this operation, this member function in their classes, right? So to ensure that this happens, I provide this display resident details as a kind of a declaration here, but I make it virtual. Now let me comment it out, and let's just run it and see what happens. Errors, right? Here these two are warnings, so we can ignore it, but here you see function display resident detail should have a prototype. Okay, now which means what? I can provide this prototype. I can depend on the other two people to provide the prototype for this in their classes. But then what is the guarantee? Since there is no guarantee, what I do is I provide the prototype here and I call it here. Okay, so just think it over. It's a little bit tricky, but it's very, very important. Okay, so display resident details gets executed and then this. So this is very, very important. Now a class which has a virtual member function is called a abstract class. Basically meaning that that particular class cannot be instantiated. You cannot create a instance of a class which has a virtual function. Basically, when I say virtual function, it means that it is not complete. Since it is not complete, it can't be instantiated. Okay, now let's run this very quickly, because most of the functionality we have already seen. So the only thing we have to look at is the test marks, whether it accepts it in the right place and displays it in the right place. So our roll number 84, name let's say Vis, enter parent name, let's say D, let's say parent address, let's say Milk Colony, telephone number, let's say 848484. Remember, after accepting these details, it's supposed to accept the marks. So subject maths 84, science 74, right? And since I selected resident student, it's asking for hostel number. So hostel number is 2, hostel fees is, let's say 2399, hostel room number is 345, and it is displaying what? It is displaying in the correct order. So it is displaying the student details and the parent details, then the hostel details, and then the marks details. Okay. Similarly, let's very quickly do it for non-resident students. Okay, so 845 is the roll number. Name of the student is, let's say Vis. Parent name is, let's say Dis. Parent address is, let's say Milk Colony. Telephone number is 848484. Subject maths is let's say 43. Science is, let's say 84. See, since it is a non-resident student, it is asking for guardian's name. So guardian's name is, let's say Bis, and guardian address is, let's say Raghavendra Layout. Telephone number, let's say 949494, and you see it is displaying it in the right order. It is displaying the roll number, name, parent name, address, telephone, guardian's name. There is no hostel involved here, and there was no guardians involved in the previous run. Okay, so please go through this carefully, understand it fully, and let's close this and let's quit.